The year 2020 has been a catastrophic year for all large events, including the anime convention scene, particularly Oricon, Kazacon, Anime USA, and others in the DC metropolitan area. Many of them are forced to cancel or convert to largely glorified live streams due to the government response to the pandemic, which is in a long term a very bad idea which we will pay for at least 50 years. But that is another video. To be frank, I did not enjoy any of the convention's virtual cons because they're all glorified live streams. Because they're just reminders of things we cannot have and things that we have not just taken for granted but thrown in the trash. Especially the sports theme that Oricon was supposed to have. Most anime cons have largely kept their themes for next year, and possibly for next year, including BirdCon. In particular, I was looking forward to new merchandise, especially the potential opportunity to buy this flag that Oricon was planning to feature in their advertisement flyer for 2020. Since they have their own online con, I stopped attending them because it just reminds me of what we lost. It's worse than better than nothing. But that's another story. The good news is that we have several vaccines available and states are slowly beginning to open up. Two of them are Florida and Texas. They're basically wide open right now. The bad news is that conventions are still virtue signaling and performing hygiene videos to please the coronabros, despite vaccines that will be readily available by May 1st. Here's one example that I've been hearing. It's an anime-con pop culture convention called ConnectCon, and this is the screenshot I have received that was not only rescheduled to September 9th through 12th of 2021, they got this BS vaccine requirement, which I'll show you in this screenshot. Proof of vaccination will be required to attend. An effort to make sure everyone has a safe experience at ConnectCon will be requiring one or two things in order to attend the convention. You need to show us that you've been fully vaccinated. That means you have your final Corona vaccination dose 14 days before you attend the convention, or you need to show us the result of a negative COVID-19 test issued 48 hours or less from the time you pick up your badge. We'll be also enforcing any and all required protocols from local, state, and federal government. With the event being nearly 6 months away, we don't know what those will be. But as we learn we'll be sure what rules to be in place. This vaccine requirement sets a dangerous precedent. And the vaccine requirement marks a red line that a growing amount of Americans do not want. And I'm very opposed to this requirement for any convention because it says to them that we do not trust our customers or patrons. What they could have done is encouraged everyone to get vaccinated if they're able to and want to. Because there are plenty of people who don't want the vaccine or can't take it because they're allergic to vaccines, or they have a medical disability, or they have a religious obligation not to take a vaccine. Now, if they actually encourage people to just take the vaccine as much as possible, that'll be a lot different. And that way we'll not be worried about a potential outbreak because the Corona bug would have been long gone by summer or September. And here's the thing, it will not be effective anyway. I mean, the proof will be worthless because you can easily search for a copy of a blank vaccine card and have it signed by people in the know by word of mouth. Worse, even with these vaccine passports, there are possibility of doctors who can fill out the vaccine passport without even injecting the vaccine. So not only is it ineffective, it'll just drive people into finding ways to get it filled without having taken the vaccine. And in this type of stuff, this vaccine requirement, since the vaccine is not fully approved, it's actually possibly unlawful because it's approved by the Food and Drug Administration as an EUA or emergency use authorization product. Now let's take a look at this legal news article by J.D. Spur. May employers mandate COVID coronabros vaccines. And here are the following two exceptions I wanted to highlight. While employers may likely mandate vaccines for their employees, doing so raises a host of legal and practical considerations that employers must consider before any such programs are implemented. These include these two primary reasons: the need for accommodate employees who, because of medical condition, cannot take the vaccine, and two, the need to accommodate employees who, because of sensitively held religious beliefs, cannot take the vaccine. What these people, when encountered with these vaccine requirements, they're just going to say, I have a medical exception or a religious exception. And guess what? Stores, product combinations, and people who run these conventions are not allowed to add which exception or which religion, because it would be discriminatory. Now, with this vaccine, again, it's an emergency use authorization vaccine. It has not been fully approved. The Food and Drug Administration is permitted to make a product available by an emergency by issuing an EUA. But this is part of the article that a document I found from the New Hampshire Department of Health. And it says here the FDA is permitted to make a product available during emergency by issuing EUA when certain criteria are met. This is the typical FDA approval of a vaccine. One important difference is that a typical FDA approval is that the EUA must address an individual's right to refuse the vaccine and any consequences of that refusal. Organizations company requiring a coronabros vaccination should consider guidance or recommendations coming from the FDA and or the CDC or other public health officials on this matter. Did Connecticut actually consult the FDA, CDC, or public health officials for this? I'm assuming no. The real question is, did they consider guidance from and recommendations on this matter? But in reality, it seems to be more like virtue signaling towards people who embrace safetyism. Basically, coronabros. Now let's continue. But can a business require customers to show proof of a vaccination in order to patronize their business? It's really dependent on the state, but according to the info sheet called Coronabros Vaccine Frequently Asked Questions for Schools, Employers, Employees, and Businesses. Can a business require customers to show proof of a coronabros vaccination in order to patronize their business? Generally, yes, as long as the required coordinations are made under the FDA and the business complies with any applicable provisions of the Civil Rights Act and any other state and federal anti-discrimination laws. Business should carefully consider all implications of a vaccine mandate and consult with a legal counsel. The state of New Hampshire does not recommend this type of mandate and will not be implementing any type of uniform vaccination certification for the purposes of implementing this type of mandate. So yeah, New Hampshire, they're not doing a vaccine passport. No, they're already opposed to it. And thankfully they won't be enforcing it. They don't want a vaccine passport. And Florida made it very clear that they don't want a vaccine passport. And Governor Ron DeSantis actually signed an executive order putting such a vaccine passport. Now I'll continue. This is the real reason why I'm opposed to these mandates or any form of vaccine passport. It's potentially discriminatory against people who cannot take the vaccine due to medical reasons or because they have a disability that prevents them from taking the vaccine. Now let's take a look at another article from the Rolling Stone that do we require coronabros vaccinations? It really depends on who you talk to. Now here's the article. The legality of these policies depends on where the company is based. U.S. law only controls business inside the U.S., which tells the Rolling Stone. There's not much we can do if a business outside the U.S. decides that they're going to require a vaccine certificate for flying, as would be the case for Australian-based Qantas. But American companies are a different story. The general rule is that private businesses are private legal persons. They have rights, and they don't owe other people's constitutional rights, West explains. Basically, private businesses have a lot of leeway to determine what conditions they put on their business, as long as they comply with the the ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Civil Rights Act. There are, however, 3 limitations on private businesses that could apply to mandatory vaccination policies. Like I said, the first is that private companies have to work within the laws of their local jurisdiction. So if states and localities want to make sure that private companies don't have the authority to issue vaccine mandates, they can always pass a law limiting the ability of a business to do this, she explains, like Florida. The second is that private accommodation businesses like hotels, theaters, restaurants are subject to limitations found in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, including being prohibited to discriminate based on a person's religion. According to Riss, some may argue that their religious beliefs are in conflict with a vaccine requirement, something that those against masking policies have already attempted unsuccessfully. Finally, there is the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, which requires businesses to make necessary accommodations for people with disabilities, which in this case says will include those who the current iterations of the Coronabros vaccine are not recommended. Between companies gaining so much freedom to set their own policies and the public having multiple ways to seek exceptions from them, Riss predicts that when the private vaccine mandates begin, they will be challenged in court. I expect any businesses, and at least some that put in such a mandate, will probably be sued at some point, she says. Sandra Spurgeon, an attorney practicing in Kentucky who specializes in civil litigation and health law, also see this playing out in court. There are advertisements from lawyers seeking clients to litigate against employers for employees contracting coronabros in a business setting, or those who contract the virus if they have been in a movie theater, she says, Rolling Stone. And even if you get vaccinated, you will still have to adhere to all this hygiene fear, physical distancing, capacity limits, which actually bars people who held off from going to these, from even registering for these cons in 2020 because of the uncertainty and the mask wearing requirements, and the mask wearing requirements, which asks the question: what is the point of the vaccine if you still have to perform this virtue signaling? And even then, they'll choose. Even then, conventions and large events may still choose to move events such as arcades, masquerades, dances, and the like because of safetyism, instead of focusing on going back to normal as much as possible and making up for the lost time with new events. Basically, they're going to suck the. Basically, these policies, these self-imposed policies, are sucking the fun and turning an anime convention into a pound fest, like Anime Dallas 2020 did when it went super corona woke, and the coronabros attacked it anyway. And then the journals at Anime News Network did a hit piece on the organizer, despite them being open wide they did and allowed to the public. And Texas at the time was a relatively open state at the time. You still had your conventions as long as you follow these basic safety protocols. I mean, seriously, these policies are meant to cater to the coronabros, people who are staying home no matter what, and when they feel when an event happens, they cry and moan and they try to cancel that con, even if the convention does actually do all these safetyism BS. And the worst thing is that when these states are slowly opening up and when a convention is doing this, they're trying to put all this hygiene fear and vaccination requirements that out of fear, out of virtue signaling, and out of protection of their own brand, the coronabros will not attend it anyway, and will still try to cancel the convention anyway. So when conventions appeal to coronabros with hygiene fear, with vaccination requirements, it will actually be their downfall. They'll be worse off because the coronabros will not attend their convention anyway. Because what they're doing is they're virtue signaling. They're catering to an audience that doesn't want to buy it anyway. They had no real intention of buying it. They have no real intention of coming at all. So in reality, not only they'll lose their normal audience of people who want to come, what they're going to do, they're just going to travel to a convention out of state. That does not have those hygiene requirements or virtue signaling, such as states in Texas and Florida. Now to continue, anime conventions are safe spaces, actual safe spaces, where people want to escape and have fun. Basically, a main vacation in this nowadays a dystopian and catastrophic time on Earth. Not to be constantly reminded and LARP as if we still have a pandemic long after it's over. This type of BS, this type of crap is overkill, and I feel that they're doing this to care to people who are not going to bother attending anyway. Because these coronabros are too comfortable enjoying being shut-ins, staying home, watching Netflix, virtue signaling about Corona-chan, and canceling each other on Twitter and Facebook. And as an end result, these conventions are going to have no fun, it's going to be boring, and they're going to be losing customers over these policies. If these anime conventions want to promote health and safety, they will tell con-goers to take a multivitamin before and during the convention, especially vitamin D and vitamin C, because a lot of these convention goers have been staying inside. They're not getting sunlight, and their immune systems are relatively low. And when these people actually go to these conventions, they're going to get sick anyway, despite being vaccinated against Corona-chan. And they might get sick for other reasons, because the immune system has been weakened from staying inside all day long. You know what's even better? Advise them to wear deodorant. Advise them to take a shower every day. Especially use deodorant every day. I mean, Gen Con at one time actually planned to place bars of deodorant into their welcome bags when they get their badges or register for the convention. Because seriously, it would be a lot helpful for actual health and safety. But they call it off because they feel that a certain small audience of the convention would be offended by this. Why are they really doing this, really? Do they feel the elderly who come to an anime con get sick and die? Well, in reality, the elderly rarely attend such events. I only know one elderly person who attended these cons. He's of senior citizen age. He carries a walking stick, but he still attends anime cons, despite the fact that most of the attendees are under the age of 30. Mostly kids, youth, children, teens, and adults attend these anime cons. It's worth knowing that most of these conventions, in my opinion, despite all the virtue saying about health and safety, don't actually take health seriously. I mean, if they did, they would have a dedicated a few pages in their program book about basic convention health, especially about not drinking too much alcohol, because there are a lot of people who actually get drunk at these cons. They pass out and having end up going to a hospital, having to go to a hospital because they got drunk, they passed out, and possibly got alcohol poisoning. It's easy to say to get 8 to 6 hours of sleep, eat 3 meals a day, and take a shower once a day, and use deodorant. Not many people really listen to it or adhere to it. Also, with these mandates, we're basically telling the Congos that are disabled or medically disabled that you are not welcome. This is really discriminatory, in my opinion. And ultimately, it will cost the convention organizers money, and the hotel money. People who want to attend a convention just to escape or relax will find out about this hygiene video and may choose not to attend. This will affect them in the long run. This will cost the deals room, the people who run the deals room, the international booths money, the hotel money, the hotel money because of the food that will be made that won't be bought. So in the long run, it's going to be socially and economically harmful overall. But there is another alternative reason why people will support this hygiene theory despite these issues, and it's the ulterior motive among cosplayers in the competitive scene. Less competition. The less competition cosplayers have for these whole cosplay contests and these masquerades, the better the incumbent folk can stay and grow in their positions while preventing newcomers that might be pushed away with these hygiene fear BS from getting a foothold in the scene. The competitive cosplay scene in the United States is one of the most ruthless and competitive, especially behind the scenes, but that's another video. If any convention, despite having vaccines readily available, imposes such a mandate in an open state, and also including adhering to hygiene fear, especially mask wearing, do not bother attending. They do not deserve your money or your patronage. And if a growing amount of conventions impose such a requirement, and such as a mandate, I will, as an absolute last resort, retire from the anime convention scene, because it's clear that instead of caring to actual consumers that have been stuck at home due to the government's response to Corona-chan, or forced to stay home due to the response to Corona-chan, and figuring out how to make a convention better to make up for a missing 1 to 2 years, they will virtue signal and hygiene fear towards the coronabros that will not attend these conventions anyway, no matter what they do. And this goes for all conventions, especially Gen Con 2021, which has gone super COVID woke, and will oppose a vaccine mandate on top, despite the fact that the state where Gen Con is located has already ended all Corona-chan restrictions. Now, if a government or hotel insists on you imposing these rules, and you want to cancel your event but cannot because you cannot afford to break your contract, I'll help you raise those funds. Just contact me through my email. I'm just a small channel, but I'm willing to do a 24-hour Twitch stream per week for any convention that is forced to impose these conditions by your government or hotel. And you don't need to do an online con if you choose to cancel. I will restructure your event as a year-long set of video programming. Online cons, all virtual events, are insults. And we already got an online con. It's called YouTube. We have YouTube content creators that are doing a better job, in my opinion. But that's another video. And ultimately, if I was running a convention, if I was forced to impose these said rules by a hotel or government, I'll cancel our protest. I'll make a statement why I'm canceling our protest. I'll hold the local or state government responsible for this. And I'll cancel our protest, and I will not reschedule until all these rules are rescinded. We will have real in-person conventions. Back to normal as possible. No vaccine mandates, no hygiene fear. Back to normal. Convention goers deserve nothing less. That's all I have in this video. If you like this video and you want more videos in the convention scene, please like and subscribe if you want to see more. I will talk to you soon. This is JK from the Ministry of Otaku. Sign off for now. And seriously, whether or not you taking the vaccine or not, it's none of anyone's concern. It's none of your business concern. It's none of convention concern. You have every right to be open or not where you want to take the vaccine, or you want to tell people that you're taking the vaccine. Your medical information is none of anyone's business except you and your doctor or your practitioner. It is of no one's business.